make sure you've opened your chat box. If you don't know where it is, just hover over either the top or the bottom of your screen. You'll click the chat and just give me a hi and tell me which school or area that you're from, just so that I know that you're there as well. We are recording today's session, so if someone sneaks in who shouldn't be there, just tell them not to be on the screen. So just give me a hi or hello in chat. If you can't find the chat, it might be in the 3 little buttons that are on the end that say more. If you just click that, there should be a little chat there. You should be able to press it open and just say hi in the chat box. So the session will be interactive, and the reason why I say that is you have a chance to win some prizes. Even though it is virtual, I still give away prizes. So anybody who knows me knows that I like to give things away. So first up, we have a squidgy stress person. You can win this little fella out in the post. You can also win, it's similar, but it's a USB, and it's also got some resources on it as well for schools. Ladies and gentlemen, if you look like more of a stylish yet practical bunch, you might be interested in the keyring, but it's not just a keyring, it's a torch as well. Super exciting. I can see Karen, that perked your day up, didn't it? But ladies and gentlemen, the pièce de résistance, you could win a curly whirly that could be in the post to you. So hello from Wiltshire, Essex, Horwich in Essex, and hello to Erica there as well. So a small but perfectly formed group. Now, I'm not going to tell you about myself first, because this is your first chance to win prizes for you to tell me about me. So my name's Stephanie Davies. I'm the CEO here at Laughology and Head of Happiness. That's all I'm going to tell you for now, because you're going to tell me whether, and pop this in the chat box, I was a head girl or a naughty girl. So pop that in the chat box and you could win a prize. If I shout out your name, make sure you note that you've won a prize, and I will get back to you. Okay. It was Karen, straight in there. You win the first prize. I was a naughty girl, and I'll tell you a little bit about my background. So my background is a little bit different. So I started out in stand-up comedy 22 years ago now, and then I went into psychology. And a little bit of my background, and the reason why I'm telling you this is my education experience was brilliant in primary school. Really enjoyed it, loved it, but I started to struggle around the end of primary. Then I went into secondary, struggled a whole lot more. I didn't realise why I couldn't get stuff in my head. I just couldn't. So I'd mess about. I was really embarrassed. I just wanted to be sent out of class, so I didn't have to engage. And that kind of followed me all the way through school until I got suspended twice and then expelled once. And the brilliant output is I had an amazing teacher, and it just takes one who noticed that the thing that inspired me was drama, got me into drama, and then I went to performing arts school later on, where it was identified I'm dyslexic and quite severely dyslexic as well. Hence you might see some spelling mistakes through this. I do double check it, but sometimes there's just errors. That inspired me to help young people even more. So when I started doing stand-up, I went back into schools and took stand-up into schools to help children read and write, because that's what made me want to read and write, and that's where we are now. So when I realised I'm not thick, I just learn in a really different way, and I love teaching young people and engaging with young people. I went back to university and did a master's in psychology with a real keen interest in behavioural psychology, learning and happiness and humour and the brain, and that's how Laughology was born. I've got a team of 15, we've been going 16 years. And everything that I share today, steal it, have it, I will be sharing the slides afterwards, and I'll make sure we send you some cheat sheets afterwards as well. Okay, so next chance to win a prize. Do I drive an Audi TT or Lexus NX? What do you reckon? Audi TT or Lexus NX? Straight in there, Emma, with Lexus. Hayley's Lexus. Oh, you're all right. Do you know what? Prizes for all. It is Lexus. I'm very environmentally conscious. So I like to plug my car in. It's part electric. That does. Normally people guess Audi TT. You're the first ones that have all gone Lexus. Surprise for everybody. Okay, finally, Am I a cat or chickens person? Cat or chickens person? I can see we've already got a cat on. Hayley says cat. Emma says quite clearly chickens. Erica is cat as well. Karen and Julie are cats too. So I am a cat person. So first in was Hayley, you get the prize. I am a cat person. I've got a very naughty cat called Barry, and he's actually more famous than me. He's been on TV quite a bit. I'll tell you about him as we go through the session. Now, the reason why I did that is a little bit of fun, but also it's the whole idea that the more we get to know people, the more we see past the person that we very first see in front of us, the more we can help people and the more we can get to know them. The way the brain works, when we first are introduced to people, we have a little template in our head that recognises maybe that voice or that sound or that face, and we start to project stuff onto that person. And so really getting to know people for me is really understanding what's behind them, what motivates them, and what helps them be happy and learn. So today's session is all about how we create the right environment for fun and laughter, using humour appropriately. What does that mean? Some sticky learning, mental health stuff. Humour's a way for adjusting and thinking in the moment. What I call flip it thinking, and techniques for positive thinking. So like I said, everything you see today, have fun with, steal and use. So I just want to get your brains warmed up a little bit more. So these are what I call brain burps, and they're really good for laughter and learning. And it comes from my comedy background, because in comedy it's all about mixing ideas, mixing places and mixing characters. And when I used to work in schools, I used to use brain burps all the time for helping young people to learn, children to learn about subjects in a different way. So I'm just going to warm you up first with this. So this is an activity called 5 Ways To. Okay, so no worries, Julie, we'll see you soon. We won't use all the prizes. We'll save some for you. Julie's just going for a break. So this is called 5 Ways To. Hands on your buzzers. Okay, 5 ways to make a giraffe cry. 5 ways to make a giraffe cry. Be as fun and as wacky as you like. The more wacky I like. And don't think that you can't write something, because you absolutely can. Erica, I can see your mind going because you're smirking there. I want you to write that thought. 5 ways to make a giraffe cry. Have a bit of fun with it. What do you reckon? It's just a eat all the leaves on the trees, like that, says David. A rude gesture, I like it, Karen. Pinch its nose with a huge ladder, absolutely. Anything else that we've got? 5 ways to make a giraffe cry. I like someone who's just come in here. They might read all our comments. What on earth is this session is about? Okay, make it crawl into a tiny cave. Emma, you've just won yourself a prize. Brilliant, love it. Okay, so welcome to Kay Flaherty, who's just come in. So we're just doing some brain burps warm up, so get your chat box open. So the next one is 5 ways to end a bad date. 5 ways to end a bad date. Haley's just thought there. There's been a few that I've been on. Which one do I choose? 5 ways to end a bad date. Have a bit of fun. Don't edit yourselves. Just pop it, climb out the bathroom window. Karen, we've all been there, haven't we? We've all been there, trying to get out very quickly. Rescue call from a friend every time. Pick your nose and eat it. Emma, that's brilliant. So pick your nose and eat it, or sneeze and tell them that you've got COVID, maybe. Start a food fight in the restaurant. I'd actually stay, I think, for that part of it. Brilliant, love it. Okay, so the reason why I do this is it gets people talking, and there's no wrong answer. And the more we get the brain giving answers, the more likely we are going to give answers, and we can use this for learning. So in learning, I've used it to mix ideas. So, for example, give me a famous celebrity. Give me a famous celebrity. Anyone in the world. Anyone in the world. So Robbie Williams, Oh, you're my kind of girl, Karen. Robbie Williams, the Kardashians, or Brad Pitt. Let's take the Kardashians. Let's take the Kardashians. And let's take a household object. A household object. Give me anything. Anything that you like, a household object. Let's go with, we've got a toilet brush there. So what if the Kardashians, is it Kim Kardashian and a toilet brush were standing in the same room? What 5 things would they have in common? What if Kim Kardashian and the toilet brush were standing in a room? What 5 things would they have in common? Great big hair, says Emma. Both thin, but have a big bottom, a big bushy bottom like that. Both slim, brilliant. And you can do this with places, so you can mix it with places. For example, in schools I've asked things like, where would Donald Trump go on a holiday and why? Or mixing characters, so it might be if Britney Spears and someone from history went on a date, where would they go and why? So it's just a really good idea and a way to get kids talking and exploring characters, exploring places, because what they have to do is think about why those things were there and give them back. It also gets them talking, and once they're talking and having fun and laughing, their brain feels safe. So they're more likely to talk through some of the more curriculum-based topics as well. So when we create an environment that is safe and ready for what I call learning, we need these 4 things. And the 4 things that are super important for what I call sticky learning is mood, memory, meaning, and movement. And just to go through some of those, so mood is obvious. We talk about the importance of what goes on in the brain, which I'll talk about a little bit more in relation to mood. So we need neurotransmitters for learning. We also need neurotransmitters for memory. So when we are upbeat and happy, we learn best through our emotions. So when those emotions are positive, the brain holds on to them better. We learn through negative emotions as well. But the thing is, we need to have that negative feeling again, generally, to recall that information. We also need it to mean something to us. So we need it to relate to our life. And all those things create memory. And when we create meaning, it creates memory in our own brain. And if we move with something as well, we're more likely to link that movement to learning. I remember the days of the month in French because of a song that we learned when I was in primary school, and we had to bob up and down to every single song, and it was really funny, and you had to bob at the month that you were at, and it was just that laughter. And I remember all those days of the month even now. So remember those 4 key things for learning, and I'll talk to you a little bit about why they're important and the connection to neuroscience. So who can tell me, what are the 4 neurotransmitters that are super important to helping us to feel better, feel in control, and feel happy? Endorphins, straight in there, you get a prize. Kay Flaherty, give me your real name just so I know what it is. So if you do win a prize, write it down just so we know, and you can email me afterwards. So what else? There's another few. Kath, lovely, thanks, Kath. So what are the other 3? The other 3, I'll give you a clue. Dose is a clue for what they start with. So endorphins is one. Well done, Kath. Have you got any more? There's another one that helps us sleep as well. Dopamine, well done, David, brilliant. So we've got an O and an S. David, celebrating that you got one there. An O and an S. Have we got any ones that we also know? Okay, so a dose is a really good way to remember it. Dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, and endorphins. Haley just popped in there. Fingers aren't fast enough, but we got there. Brilliant. So serotonin. So Kath, David, and Kath, and Emma and Haley, you get a prize for that. So these neurotransmitters are super important for learning. They're important for sleep as well. They're important for our happiness. When we learn something new, the brain fires. So it creates what we call dendrites or learning pathways. And those pathways connect together when there's new bits of information. The only way that they can connect together is through these things. These things power these connections to move. And the reason why I call it sticky learning is because these neurotransmitters act like little bits of glue on the end of the branches in the brain, and actually glue that information together, glue those branches together, which is why we learn best when it's positive emotions. So super important, and I'll talk about this a little bit more as we go along. So if we are talking about happiness, I want to first just talk about what it is, what helps us be happy. And one of the things I always say is I'm passionate that happiness and laughter and humour starts with you guys, because you guys are the important people in school. Children and young people are absolutely important, but if you guys aren't healthy and happy, they're not going to be. So they always look to you. So everything that I talk about today is as much for you as it is for your school and your school environment. But also, when I talk about happiness, and I just want you to think about, as I'm talking, what helps us be happy, and pop that in chat for me. What are the things that help us to be happy? And there's no right or wrong answer with this, but what are the things that we need in life to be happy? And when I talk about this, I just want to do a caveat. And even though I've studied happiness in human for years, there's one thing that I'd say, which is chasing happiness will make you unhappy. So it's okay not to be happy. We absolutely need all the emotions in our life to be able to be stable people. And what I call realistic happiness, it's not about avoiding things that make you unhappy, and it's also understanding the difference between pleasure and happiness. So we've got some brilliant responses here. So yeah, friends and family, relationships, positive relationships, good mental health, security, safety, and feeling love, says Karen. So absolutely, that security and safety, that psychological safety is important in terms of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, sleep. I'll talk a little bit about sleep at the end, and if I forget, remind me, and I'll also send you a cheat sheet on sleep as well. Family and chocolate. I would have put them the other way round, if I'm honest, David. I would have gone chocolate first, then family. Sometimes chocolate helps me deal with my family. Good physical health, says Kath, being in control, and a sense of purpose. And all those things are absolutely right. And over the past 15 years, I've been looking at happiness. And there seems to be 5 themes that come out every single time in research, when I've done field research, but also when I've researched academically what's already out there. And those 5 themes seem to be, in no particular order, support. And the reason why I talk about support is because when I did my research, a lot of the stuff that was coming back at me was about this sense of purpose, being a part of a community, giving back, being kind. And so support was a word for me that encompassed all those things. Confidence or self-confidence, coping skills, because life isn't about being up all the time, positive relationships that people said as well, and achievement and success. We call it achievement and success with younger children and older children. With adults, we call it personal development. And you might think that this is quite simple, but when we put this into our happiness matrix, all the research that I've done. So if we take for granted that we've got safety and security, because that is so important, that people are in safe homes, they're in safe environments, all this other stuff is super important for learning and also for our own happiness and what I call realistic happiness, and getting a balance of these things in our life. Someone mentioned physical, that's really important as well. So when I talk about when I talk about resilience, I talk about the physical side of resilience, the mental side of resilience, and the social/spiritual side of resilience, how we connect to the world. But these things are super important, and sometimes one can dip and it can impact on how we feel. And being aware of these things in our lives and how they play out is super important. And if I just tell you about my own story, really relating to this. So when I moved down south 8-9 years ago, so I'm a Scouser originally. You might be able to tell that from the accent. And I moved down south about 8 years ago, and I lived up north by myself for about 15 years. All I had was me, my white sofas, my white carpets, and my fluffy cat. And I thought, how hard can it be moving down south to move in with a man and his 2 children? Surely children are like cats. Don't they poo in litter trays as well? Clearly they don't. And they were quite young children, and they lived with us most of the week at the time. Now, it was my choice. I'd chosen to do that. But after about 2 months of living down south, I was extremely unhappy. And for lots of reasons, my life had changed. But when I talked to friends about it, and particularly some of my team, they're the ones who pointed out to me, look at your own happiness matrix or drivers. What are the things that you're missing? And I was missing my girlfriends, my Scouse girlies who I had my Friday night drinks with. The other thing I was missing for me as well was I did a huge amount of charity work up north for a children's charity, which was a children's hospice. And I love connecting to the children's hospice. It just grounded me, and it gave me a lot of happiness as well. And so I thought to myself, of course, it must be those things, because my confidence was fine. I was developing myself, my coping skills. So I joined a gym. I'm not really a gym person. I'm certainly not a class person, but I did it to make friends. And I also got in touch with a hospice down here who I work with now. And it did make a huge difference. And that's what I mean about it's okay not to be happy, but we are absolutely in control of understanding where we can adjust these things. And part of my research quite early on was looking at how could this work in school environments. And so I worked with a school down here, actually, in the south of England called St Matthew's Primary School. And particularly chose that school because it was in a difficult area. And we put the 5 themes of happiness in over the whole year, with one being explored every half term, with the intro being happiness. So it looked a little bit different when we do it in schools. And I'll send you some free resources on this. But what we started to see was a real change in the way the children were. We did a baseline survey with an external psychologist at the beginning and one at the end. And the happiness and well-being levels went up. But what we didn't realise would happen was this 20% improvement in maths and English. And it kind of makes sense to people like me and you who work in this all the time. Well, for me, it was a shock, but it would probably make sense to you. You get the basics right, and everything else falls into place. And so what I always encourage schools to do is we have resources and we have a happiness program. You can do all this thing for free, and just make sure that this is part of the way that you do things. And I'm just going to explore this a little bit further. So we'll take them one at a time. I'm going to look at confidence and interpersonal risk. So what tends to happen when we think about confidence is we don't want to look ignorant or incompetent, therefore we don't ask questions, or we don't admit weakness or make mistakes, or we feel that if we offer an idea, we might be intrusive or come across as silly. The left hand of the side is what we call the interpersonal risk, and we see this a lot in classrooms and staff rooms, which is why the brain burps idea is so good, and using humour, because when you offer a question up with humour and you say anything's possible, people aren't going to stop themselves giving an answer, because there's no interpersonal risk yet there. The whole point is to look silly, is to have fun. But when the brain starts to feel that safe, it's more likely to feel confident. So psychological safety is really important. I'm just going to ask you to pop in the chat box. What types of things do you know from your expertise are important to psychological safety? What are the things that you do, perhaps either in your classroom or staff room, that you know increase psychological safety? It's a little bit probably different to happiness, but what are the things that help us to increase psychological safety? I don't know if anyone's got any thoughts on there. Do offer them. Don't forget, we've got curly whirlies as prizes. So do pop them in there. So I'll give you a little bit of a clue. I'll go with the first one. So a learning culture, which is something that you've already got. This idea of encouraging curiosity, learning from mistakes, and a growth mindset. I've put collaborative teams here, but it's also about collaborative working in schools and sharing information, making time for fun and making time for conversation. So we know that children and adults learn best through conversations, just exploring ideas as well, rather than being put on the spot. A real supportive environment where it's safe to speak up, and reward recognition of effort as well as outcomes, that real growth mindset, and be available to really, really do listen. And David says you often ask questions that you know children know the answer to, just to build confidence. Absolutely. Role modelling is really important. I've put clarity here, and I've put here an understanding of role, because that's important for adults, but it's also for children, an understanding of what it is that they're meant to be doing. I think one of the things I certainly struggled with when I was younger is really clearly understanding a brief. And even now in the role that I do now, I always email back to people, is this the brief? Is this what you want me to do? Because sometimes I'll hear stuff and I'll hear it a little bit wrong. And also context, what does it mean to me? So one of the lovely exercises that you can do in your classroom, staff room, or with your teams and children is introduce some of those ideas around psychological safety, and then draw a big circle and say, and talk about, actually, in terms of our behaviours, what are the things that we would like in the circle, the things that help us feel safe, that we like, that's nice. And it might be things like being kind to each other. It might be putting my hand up and being able to ask a question, or it might be talking before I have to give an answer, so I can clarify what I need to say. And then some of the behaviours that are out there, whatever you agree, that you say, okay, so we won't do these anymore. But agreeing that can really help in classrooms and staff rooms. Talk about personal development, because this is the way we talk about it with adults. With children, we talk about achievement and success. And this could be about setting what I call a stretch goal. So this is something that is just a little bit beyond, and doing that with children, and then talking about how you're going to focus on it. You give that growth feedback and reflect and refine. I always encourage what I call feed forward rather than feedback. Feedback is based on things that have already happened. We can't do anything about it. Feed forward, I call it the ABC technique. So a quick audit, okay, where are we now? And where do we need to be? And that can even help with children. Where are we now in terms of marking, in terms of our correct answers, in terms of our understanding? Brainstorm, so ideas of how you could help yourself be even better, and a commitment. So what both actions will we take away as a child, but also as me as a teacher, that I can help you move forward. I call it the ABC technique, and it's about move forward. So support was on our happiness matrix. I'm going to give a big prize. So this is your chance to win the Laughology book, if you can tell me where this place is in the world. So where is this place in the world? Any guesses that we've got? Where do you reckon it is? I'll give you a clue. It's up north. It is Liverpool somewhere. Well done. Nearly there. Karen, go on. Give it one last push. Do you know whereabouts in Liverpool it is? I'd love it to be my house, Emma. Wouldn't that be lovely? It's brilliant. I live down south now, Emma. That's my house in Liverpool was probably not even half the size of that. It was tiny. Karen, you are going to win the book, actually, because you were closest. So well done. So this is a place called The Lever, which was created by the Lever brothers in Liverpool. Does anybody know a little bit about that and why I've put it up there for support? So the Lever brothers in Liverpool, they created a soap factory, and what they realised really early on is that people were only going to work when they felt supported, when everything around them was okay. So they built this amazing village. These houses were for the workers. This is where the workers lived. They built a school. There's a beautiful school just around the corner from here, in Port Sunlight, and it's Port Sunlight Primary School. It's stunning. And they created this village where doctors were, where education was, where people could have a community. And what they realised is people would work and learn better when we didn't just support them inside their school or inside their workplace. Watch this, guys. This is what I've learnt in lockdown. You'll be amazed by this. When they supported them outside. I can see that you're not very impressed by my arrows moving. I tell you what, that's taken me probably since March, start of lockdown, to learn how to do that. I was expecting more of a trumpet kind of response going on there. But what the Lever brothers realised is when they looked outside the community of where they're thinking about where these people, where they want to have happiness, they looked beyond the school, they looked beyond the workplaces, and actually that created a real connectivity. So schools are amazing places for being community hubs. And one of my things is, how do we do more of it? And then the other one is positive relationships, the importance of positive relationships. Someone already said this before. I call it your happiness heroes. I'll send this as a resource that you can do with your young people in schools. It's just fill in somebody who helps you make a mistake, somebody who helps you feel good. And sometimes in times of crisis, we need to find out who are those people. And then finally, we talked about coping skills. I'm going to talk to you a little bit more about how coping skills can shift our focus from that kind of reactive auto response to that circle of control. And this is a lovely technique that we use at Laughology to help us manage our thinking and to flip our thinking, to be able to think differently and build upon those those positive neurotransmitters. So like I said before, as human beings, we tend to see the world through the way we feel. And that can be helpful sometimes, but unhelpful sometimes. So I'm going to give a prize for anybody who can tell me how many bits of information do you think the brain processes every single second? Every single second. How many bits of information do you think the brain processes? It's a lot, by the way. How many bits of information do you think the brain processes every single second? 20,000, Karen, you get a prize just for having a go. It's not right. It's way more than that. It's way more than that. Millions, says Erica. Julie Green says 1 million as well. So, Erica, I'm going to give you the prize because it is 11 million bits of information every single second. Now, the brain can actually only cope with 50 bits of information. So what it does is it does what we call fast processing. So what it does is it relies on our beliefs, our values, and our memories. So it goes from the situation in front of us and it goes, what have I got in my filing cabinet of experience that I might know about this situation? And how did that make me feel last time? And therefore, how can I react to it this time? So it's called fast processing. Now that can be super helpful, but what it also does sometimes is it stops us seeing the situation in the light that it is and can stop us being able to manage our thought process because our feelings can take over. So coping skills is about recognizing when we are in that reactive focus where we're reacting based on our feelings, and how can we be more proactive, being able to think things through in the moment with the thought process. And like I said, this is a lovely technique called flip it thinking. And I'm going to share with you the cheat sheets on this as well after this session. So flip is what I call the humour toolkit. And it's based on my years of being a stand-up comedian, that when actually as a stand-up comedian, if you had a bit of a rubbish day, you thought, well, that's quite a good thing really, because I can use that for 10 minutes worth of material, much to my boyfriend's disgust, and which is probably the reason why I was single for a good 10 years as well. But flip then also came out of my experience of doing psychology, that when I went and studied psychology, I thought there's a real connection here between humour thinking and CBT. So flip is what I call your humour toolkit. It stands for focus, language, imagination, and pattern breaking. And what it's based on is how do we get those lovely thinking and thought processes that we were talking about before? How do we produce that dose of positive neurotransmitters that help us feel better? When we feel better, we think better. I'm going to send you this as a cheat sheet as well, so you'll get all these lovely visuals after the session. So what we tend to do is when we react to a situation, our autofocus is based on how we feel. And I'm going to show you an example of this and how it affects how we see the world. So very quickly, hands on your keyboards. Just tell me, how do you think and feel when I show you this? How do you think and feel when I show you this? I can see Karen's reaction straight away. Sorry, Karen, don't like it. Move away. I'll move it off. So I'm going to put a caveat out there. If you don't like spiders, happy, says Nicola, so everyone's different. See, Nicola quite likes them. You can come to my house. I'll call you Nicola next time. I've got a spider. I'm one of these Hoover people. I just leave it on and hope it goes away. Karen or everybody else, caveat, if you really don't like spiders, look away now. Okay, so how do you think and feel when you see this one? It's gone, Karen. I've took it away. I've took it away because I'm the same as you. I don't like them. So straight in there, Hayley with, oh, don't like it. What are other people's responses? We've got an from Hayley, whereas before Hayley said, oh, I don't like it as well. Any other responses? Hairy, says Julie. Hopefully you're talking about the spider, not my top lip. Since lockdown, I haven't had it done. So absolutely, the first spider that we saw it was okay. It was a little bit funny. It had white gloves on and a few tap dancing shoes. So we looked at it differently because we looked at it through humour. And even though, Karen, you kind of went, oh, it wasn't one of those that you completely wanted to turn away from. The second one, it changes. And even I can't look at the second one. And so humour changes the way we see the world. But how can we, without looking at spiders or funny pictures, how can we do that? And this is what I call your humour triggers. So your humour triggers are the things that make you laugh. So just pop in the chat box, what are the things that make you laugh? Have fun with it, don't edit yourselves. What are the things that make you laugh? It might be past experiences or memories. Just pop in the chat box. And you work in school, so I should imagine children will be in there somewhere. Sarcasm, I'm with you, Julie, definitely. Silly noises. Karen, are you thinking about farts at all? Me too. I can't help but laugh. I'm very childish when it comes to trumping. So even when we think about the things that make us laugh, we go back into our back part of our brain that I was talking about before, what we call our basal ganglia. When we think about it in the current time, it pulls it forward to the prefrontal cortex. When it's sitting here, it's as if it's really happening again. And so our brain doesn't recognize the difference between us thinking about something that's made us laugh or made us happy to something in reality. So it still sends out those lovely neurotransmitters that we were talking about before. And so it can change the way we feel. And how many of us have ever been in a meeting? It's a little bit boring. Maybe it's gone on a little bit too long and you just drift off and all of a sudden you go into your own brain, you go, shit, sorry. That was just a thought process. And so just thinking about what makes us laugh shifts our focus. And we've got silly noises, absurdity, but doing this regularly for ourselves, even with our staff room or our classroom, can change the brain, rewire the brain. So we know from research, asking every single day at the end of the day, what's made you laugh, or what have you been grateful for, what have you enjoyed in today's session, can rewire the brain to a more optimistic way of thinking. But even in the moment, it might just mean that we feel good. When we feel good, we think better. So it's just a different way to trigger us to think differently. These are nicer pictures now, Karen, just so you know, they're nicer pictures. So just tell me now, very quickly, what do you think and feel when you see this? I'm saying the nicer pictures. Some of you might not be cat people. Some of you might be more doggy people. Cute, says Julie. David, you quite like that. This isn't my cat. This isn't Barry. Barry's a Bengal. Some of you might not even like cats. So it's very unique to all of us. However, how do you feel when you see this? How do you feel when you see it? I can see Karen's reaction. It's a tail, Karen and David. It's just a tail. Emma just wondering what the hell's going on. What kind of session has she come into? So we can't go and look at cat pictures online all the time, but we can be in control of the way we think. And if we change the way we see things, then if we change the way we look at things, we change the way we see things. It's one of my favourite drawings. I usually draw this on a board. Cat or bird? Do we see a cat or a bird? And it's just, we are absolutely in control of the way we view the world, but sometimes we just have to tell ourselves, am I focusing on this through the way I feel? And is it my feeling lens that is looking at this in a way that's unhelpful, or can I change the way I look at this in a situation? But it is okay not to feel okay, but in the current situation, is there something that I can do? And there's just some shift focus questions as well. So I'm going to talk about the L for language. So L is for language. And as human beings, language helps us see the world in a really different way. And it personifies how we view the world as well. And there's something that I like to call wonky language. So in psychology, they call this common cognitive errors. But I don't like big words because they just confuse me. So I just call it wonky language. And it's just when those thoughts are a little bit wonky. So if someone says that was a complete disaster, that's what we call wonky language, or they call it catastrophic language. Or that was a bit tough today, or rather, I feel stupid. It might be, how can we look at this differently through positive positioning? And I always like fun language. Comedians are brilliant linguists, and they'll just completely change the context of the situation by changing the way they say something. And so fun language is super important as well. And just pop into chat for me any perhaps wonky thoughts or wonky language that you've had, especially over lockdown, and when we've had those perhaps experiences that we've had. And I've heard lots of wonky language things like I'll never see people again. And it's just about correcting that and just saying you're safe at the moment. And I just want to tell you a little story about my time many years ago when I was a stand-up comedian. So when I very first started out in stand-up, I don't know if anybody have ever gone and seen stand-up, but when you very first start out in stand-up, you only get given little gigs. So you probably get given 10 minutes in a comedy club, and if you do well, you're allowed to do the next 10 minutes. And if you do well, then you're allowed to do 15 minutes. And what tends to happen is you find someone who perhaps can be your comedy mentor. So someone perhaps who you gig with quite regularly and who can take you to events and get you on events. And my comedy mentor was a little guy in Liverpool who was around gigging just about the same time as I was, called Johnny Bishop. And he became my comedy mentor. And Johnny's a larger-than-life character and was super helpful. And this one night, I remember, it was many years ago when Liverpool won the Capital of Culture. It was a Saturday night that we won the Capital of Culture, and we had a gig on the Sunday night in Newcastle. Can anyone remember? David, you're ahead of me. Can anyone remember who we won the Capital of Culture against? It was Newcastle. So I phoned Johnny and I said to Johnny, are we really going to do this? This is going to be a disaster. Already in the comedy world, there's a couple of rules, and the rules are the more north you get, the harder the gigs are. Because generally, the more north you are, they're generally funnier than you, they're harder than you, and they're drunker than you as well. So Johnny said, yeah, we'll do this. I phoned him again on the Sunday and I was like, Johnny, are you sure? I don't mind if you don't want to do it. He's like, no, I'll pick you up at 1 o'clock. We had to be there for 6. So he picked me up, usually 1:30 he'd arrive because he was always late, Johnny. And all the way up there, I'm saying to Johnny, we are going to die. You do know that, don't you? This is going to be one of those death gigs. It's already known in Newcastle as a bear pit, this particular gig. And all the way up there, I was being really negative about the situation. And we got there, we were a bit late. Johnny went on, even he struggled, but he did all right because Johnny's very professional. But because I saw him struggle, my heart rate's going up, my negative wonky thinking has completely taken over. And this is how the compere introduced me on. He said, next up, we've got another Scouser, and it's a woman. I went on to booze. It's probably one of the worst gigs I've ever done in my life. Johnny did what's known in the comedy world as a tight 20 minutes, aka 10 minutes. And I did what's known in the comedy world as a tight 10 minutes, aka 1 minute. And I got off. And we went out and I said to Johnny, let's just drive. And all the way home, he was on at me because he was always about learning. And he said, let's unpick this. And I was like, no, I don't want to. And he said, no, let's unpick it. Think about your language on the way up there. I was like, what do you mean? He said it was really negative. And this is before I'd done any of my psychology training or anything. And he said, it's just really negative. He said, and the worst thing was you were trying to engage me. And this is what we do sometimes. And I don't know if you've ever done this. So we try and group with people. It's called grouping in psychology, who will play along with our negative language. And we create this echo, a mirror chamber, and it can help us feel a little bit secure, but it's unhelpful. So for example, if I've had an argument with my husband, I might phone my best friend, and that might be you, Emma. And I might phone Emma and I might go, Emma, do you know what? Hubby's done this. He's awful. And you might go, yeah, he's a bastard, isn't he? And I go, yeah, Emma, I knew you'd agree with me. Thanks so much. And then we call Karen and we go on Zoom because we're like that these days. And we say, Karen, this is what Steph's husband's done. And Emma explains it. And Karen, because she's a bit level-headed, goes, well, have you thought about it like this? And me and Emma just text each other and say, let's not invite Karen again because she's wrong. And so we tend to go to people who will like what we say, but also echo what we say. And it can be unhelpful. So Johnny really challenged me on this. And I said to him, all right, Clever Clogs, what do you do? What are the things that you do? Because it was a tough crowd. All that stuff is true. He said, right. He said, well, don't ever tell anybody this, especially a few people from independent schools. He said, but I have a comedy mantra. I was like, what do you mean by that? He said, well, it's just a mantra that helps me. You've got any children by, it's blue. So make sure there's no doors open or anything like that. So I said, well, will you share that with me? And maybe if you share that with me, that will inspire me to come up with my own mantra. And he said, well, before I go on stage, I focus on how I want the gig to be. And I say over and over to myself, I am a funny fucker. I am a funny fucker. His words, not mine. But actually, that stayed with me for years. Even now, when I have got the pleasure of doing face-to-face live events to thousands of people, I still have that negativity in my head. And it doesn't matter how brilliant you are at your job or how amazing that you are in class. We all have those days, don't we, where we wake up and we think, is this the day they're going to find out I shouldn't be here? Is this the day they're going to find out I lied on my CV? Emma laughing there, hiding her CV in the background. But we all have those days. We all have wonky thoughts. And so the way we can think about it is we can notice it. So notice it as unhelpful. Name it, and when we say name it, I don't mean this is Ian, he's a bit wonky. I mean name it as wonky, call it a wonky thought, and then neutralize it by talking back to it. So tell me, have you got any mantras that you had growing up? Pop them in the chat box. Are there any mantras that a teacher once gave to you? Or have you got any mantras that your mom or your dad or granny gave to you? Just type them away in the chat box, because sometimes sharing mantras with other people can help people to create their own. But have that mantra, and do mantras in school. Do not share that story that I've just shared, obviously, but do mantras in school. There's nothing nicer than seeing schools when I go in and they've got flip up on the wall and the children have got their mantras up. And neutralizing it is about talking back to it with mantras. And we do know from psychology that the more we talk back to a negative thought, the more we rewire our brain to be able to think differently. And so L is for language, but it is about recognizing those wonky thoughts. I is for imagination. So imagination can help us to feel differently and think differently. And like we said at the beginning, when we did those brain burps, imagination can take us into a different world, but also help us learn with stuff as well. So when we use the imagination to think about a situation in a different way, it can really help us to learn. But sometimes our imagination can work a little bit against us as well. So I don't know if anybody has ever had to check in on whether it's a reality or not, a situation. But when we talk about imagination, think about what's coming in from the outside world. Check in on our perspectives, our beliefs, our values, and our memories. Am I thinking about this based on an experience from the past? Or is there a different way to think about this? And can I change my perspective through imagination and the behaviour as well that I have? And I just want to talk to you very briefly about my experience. So I said when I was younger, I'm dyslexic, and every Friday, every other Friday was spelling test day. And I lived in Liverpool. And like I said to you, I didn't know that I had dyslexia, but I just knew that I didn't fit in class. And so whenever there was things like spelling, I would get really, really upset. And every other Friday, I'd have what my mum would call murders with me. I'm having murders with our staff. So I'd be crying and screaming. I'd do anything not to go into school. And in the middle of it, my mum would give me the best, what I call magic question. Magic questions are things that interrupt our thinking, that suddenly make us think differently, create a different world, and get us to be imaginative. So in the middle of my crying, saying, "Mum, I don't want to go to school," your mum would say, "Yes, Steph, but what would She-Ra do?" Because I was a kid of the 80s. And I'd say, "Mum," she'd take out a golden sword, she'd put on a golden pants, and she'd go into school. And my mum would say, "Love, leave your sword at home, we're in Liverpool, but put your golden pants on." And to this day, I still have She-Ra pants. And when I'm having a bit of a rubbish day, I'll put my She-Ra pants on. I've actually got Wonder Woman pants as well. But I do put them on because it's just that imaginary thing. And so imagination questions can come in all kinds. Do put some imagination questions in the chat as well. Any imagination questions that you've used in the past with young people or children that help you move forward. And these are questions that just interrupt our thinking, and where there's anything that's possible, and it just changes direction. But imagination isn't just about how we think, it's also about how we move as well. There's a lovely part of the brain just at the top here, and it's called the supplementary motor. And the supplementary motor is responsible for how we move and movement, but it's also linked to how we feel, the amygdala in the middle of the brain. So it recognizes movement linked to emotions. So if we imagine that we are somebody and we change our facial expressions, our body language and voice and tone and pitch, or even if we imagine we're happy and we smile, there's a little part of our brain that's going, I recognize that movement as something positive. And so I'm going to send out these lovely neurotransmitters that we talked about before, and it's going to change the way that your brain reacts to a situation. I call these things your good humour ingredients. And a lovely activity to do with young people and older people and in the staff room at safe social distancing, of course, is to have them face each other, and one of them talk about a time or a memory or a place when they did something that either made them laugh or they were really happy. It might be a holiday, and for the other person to know how they're telling it, to watch their facial expressions, and then feed that back to them. And then also then to tell a story, or with children, it's quite a nice thing to do, where you talk about a vegetable that you don't quite like, and then get them to think about what they're doing with their facial expressions. And then mimic those two things, or just think about those two things, but don't tell the other person which one it is, and the other person has to guess whether they're thinking about the person or place that they really like, or the food, or the thing that they don't like. And they can tell that through just them thinking about it, because the brain just cannot help but move in response to how it feels. So it works the other way around as well, that when we move into response to how we feel, or we trick our brain, we can actually trick how we feel as well. So these things are called our good human ingredients. And what's even more lovely about them is there's a lovely top part of the brain. I don't know why I do this, because it doesn't look like this. It's called mirror neurons, but it sits, and the reason why I do that is because I think it's like the brain's Wi-Fi, and it spans round and it picks up micro and macro expressions from other people. And when other people feel in a certain way, we replicate that, which is where empathy comes from as well. And finally, the P part of flip is for pattern breaking. Flip only works when we do something different, whether that's changing the way that we look at the world in terms of our focus, changing the way we talk about something, just in terms of perhaps if we're using wonky language, can we use a bit more helpful language? If we change the way we think about something in terms of our imagination. But it can only work if we do those things. For younger people, rather than pattern breaking, we sometimes call it positive thinking. So how can we positively focus on something and change the way we feel about it, or look at it differently? How can we use positive language, and how can we use positive thinking? But flip is a lovely trigger word to help us to say to someone, how do we flip this? But also broken down, it can be used as a tool. And I just want you to pop in chat for me, just when we've taken you through flip, is there anything in there, because I've given you hopefully some stuff, what are the things that stood out to you? What are the things, just pop that in chat, that have made you go, oh, I'm going to have a go of that, or I like that. That's something that I could easily do in school with my staff or with the children. Are there any things that you've just thought that's a good little activity to do? And like I said, I'll make sure I'll get lots of the cheat sheets and resources out. So Emma, you're going to try the mantras. Lovely to hear some of the children's mantras as well. Sometimes I steal it. Magic questions are lovely. Get the children to do the magic questions for each other as well. So one of the things that you can do, Erica, is in the box in the middle of the table with younger children, is I just encourage people to put magic questions in the middle of the box every single day. So if they are stuck, they can just take them out and look at that or read that magic question, and it encourages them to think differently. Mantras linked to mindfulness. I'm coming to your school, Julie. Imagine I'm Wonder Woman. Oh, brilliant. Hope you've got the pants, Karen. Put them on, and the cape. And the cape's a brilliant thing. Just get children to create capes and put capes in a corner as well. So if they are having a bit of a tough day, encourage them to go into the corner and put a cape on, and they will think and look differently. Love the idea of getting children to watch each other's faces. Yeah, brilliant. So we can try all these things as we go back. And one of the things I always say is, your time today has been brilliant, but these things only work when we actually go back and do something. One of the other things about pattern breaking is what I call the morning mindset routine. So a lovely one to design with children. So this is my morning mindset routine, and it helps me to start the day with that right focus, with the right language, with the right kind of thinking as well. So the way I start the day is I just start the day with 3 deep breaths for about 4 seconds in and 8 seconds out. And what we know about inhaling longer for exhaling longer is it calms the heart rate down. So it's super important that we exhale for longer than we inhale, because it just calms everything down and it helps us connect with the brain as well. Good exercise, and you might know this already with children. So it's a non-language exercise as well, so it's really good for children perhaps who have hearing impairments. So just putting the hand up, you might have seen it before, and you just move your finger up and down slowly, and the children have to breathe in and out as you're moving your finger, but they also have to mimic your hand and mimic your finger at the pace that it's going. Make sure that you don't have them breathing too slowly, otherwise you might get very relaxed children at the end of it. So keep that finger going. That's a really good one for focusing children as well. If we have got them excited through brain burps, use non-verbal communication. Pop the hand up, wait till everybody's popped their hand up, pop your finger up, and then move it down, and encourage everybody to do it together. So deep breath in, 3 deep breaths, and this is a lovely one even to start in classrooms as well. Think of something that you're grateful for, or something that's made you happy, or something that you've enjoyed. Set your intention for how you're going to take it on the day. And what I mean by that is when I say set your intention, that's not, am I going to be happy today? Because we can't always be happy, but it's the intention. So if something goes wrong, what is it that I'm going to do? What have I got in my toolbox? Because when we prep already for something, if there's a challenge that comes up, how am I going to approach that? If we've got that in the toolbox and in our mind already, we're more likely to be resilient when we approach that. So how am I going to face challenges today? What's in my toolbox? And then a lovely power pose to ground yourself. And it can be Wonder Woman, Karen, it can be She-Ra, whoever it is. Give me, so Emma's already put it. Yeah, so Emma, do you do power poses with your children already? Is that what you're saying? Oh, the morning mindset routines. Oh, love it, brilliant. So does everybody know what power poses are? Give me a yay. Oh no, give me a thumbs up. So power poses are brilliant to be able to do with the children. Just put your hands on your hips, make sure they are hips, shoulders back, teeth out, I always say. And I always say you can't frown and clench your bottom at the same time. And I know you're all trying that right now, but it's not actually true. I just do it because I just see these faces of people. But if we smile, shoulders back and heads up, and we just do that and breathe for a few seconds while we're there, it calms the brain and grounds us as well. So a really lovely way to start the day. And I know children probably aren't getting out as much as they were in their lunch times, but even for lunch times as well, so we can break that up. So encourage the children. I'd love to know what your mindset routine is, Emma. Let us know what your mindset routine is. Dave says you do the power pose with midwives. I love that before a shift. Apparently they love it. Super. Emma, tell us what your mindset routine is. Come off mute and tell us what your morning mindset routine is.
So our children come in and they all know about 3 mindful breaths. So we started doing mindfulness just on Monday mornings to help them settle after a weekend, and tried lots of different things, but every session starts with 3 mindful breaths. Through lockdown, they actually taught their own families to join in mindfulness with them. We do lots of things on gratitude. So what are they thankful for? And then sometimes we just focus on breathing or how to take yourself to a happy space. So the children have happy stones that that are powered with their happy thoughts. And then if they're having a wobbly moment, they can go and take their happy stone and squeeze it and close their eyes to take them back to that happy place, to bring them back ready for the classroom. But we've moved it on now so that if we use it throughout the day and after break times, and just like you said, when they need to settle back down, we go back to mindfulness and our mindful breaths.
And teaching children at this early stage, do you know what, is absolutely everything for their foundation of learning. That will help their learning and their learning brain more than anything. So well done you, Emma, and your school. Brilliant stuff, absolutely brilliant. Anybody else got any mindset routines or good things that you want to share that you do with the children? Any additions? So just as we're coming to the end of the session, I realise it is a little bit early, so apologies for that. I think it's because we've got less of us on the session. But I always say these are the things that you can do. So what adjustments will you make to create the right environment for learning with fun? And what can you do to bring more human moments into the classroom? And do that, and don't worry about getting it wrong, because humour the whole point of it is you can get it wrong. And what can you do to combine techniques that we've learned today that's meant to be with your values, with your school, and how can you create this sticky learning in your school as well. What I would say is we've got loads of resources for free on our website, but I'll send links to David so we can get them all out to you. If you have won a prize today as well, please do email me, stephanie@laughology.co.uk. And we often do some free webinars as well. So I'll always email David if we've got a free webinar coming up, and he can let you know. Has anyone got any questions about anything or want to ask anything just before we close the session, or I'll hand back to David?